Did you know that Ikora Ray gives out quest lines that rewards 9 free exotic armor pieces? During the Spark of Hope questline, Commanders of Allah asks you to speak to Ikora at the tower where she will give 3 exotic armor pieces per class, available for you to pick up once you've unlocked all 3 light subclasses. This is going to be the start of a new video series called Beginner Builds. I'm your host, Caveman PRDR, and let's dive right into it. But before we do, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, as both help out me tremendously as I make content for you guys. Thank you. Let's get on with the video. Hello, welcome to another episode of Beginner Builds. I'm your host, Caveman PRDR, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Synthoceps Titan exotic arm piece with armor perk biotic enhancements. When you're surrounded, you gain increased melee and super damage, as well as improved weapon handling and speed. You can get Synthoceps by completing the Exalting the Flame quest line that you get through Ikora once you've unlocked all of the light subclasses for your type. Now, Synthoceps has a fairly common use case in Solar and, as of more recently, Strand. Synthoceps is a very good exotic used for ad clear and as well as DPS, depending on the situation that you find yourself in. A lot of it, a lot of the strength behind it has to do with the aspects that are in Solar, which is Roaring Flame specifically, and Strand, which specifically is also Banner of War. I'm not going to go over the Strand builds today, as you need to have the Lightfall DLC to have really go over the build for Strand, because Strand subclasses blocked behind Lightfall. So I'm just going to go over the light subclasses, which are free for all players. So, moving right along, we'll go with the abilities. The super of choice for me is Burning Maul. When you have biotic enhancements and Roaring Flames times 3 procced on Burning Maul, it actually does a quite a good bit of damage. It does take a little bit of nuance to actually balance having this available. I think this is probably something that you would more so be using for something if you're doing solo content. I think this is a really good option for yes, Burning Maul specifically. Whenever you're using this, it does stagger bosses and stagger enemies whenever you are hitting them with this. So, Burning Maul is very excellent. People use Burning Maul in the Crota encounter for Crota's End. It will stagger Crota. So, it is actually fairly nice to have someone on Burning Maul whenever you are in that DPS phase. Barricade of choice is Towering Barricade for extra cover. Your personal jump of choice. Throwing hammer is going to be one of the more necessary parts of this build, so you will want to use throwing hammer. Your choice of grenade, you can go a few grenade options. I was a big fan of using fusion grenades before. They do a lot of damage whenever you have roaring flames times 3 up. I've recently swapped over to really just using healing grenade myself, and there's going to be an explanation for this here shortly. Aspects to run, you will want to run Soul Invictus. Solar ability Final Blows, Hammer of Soul Impacts, and defeating scorched targets create sunspots. Your abilities regenerate faster and your super drains more slowly while standing in a sunspot. Sunspots apply Scorch and deal damage to targets inside. Entering a sunspot applies Restoration. Roaring Flames. Final Blows with solar abilities or ignitions increases the damage of your solar ability, stacks 3 times. So you're going to be using your throwing hammer, and if you're using a damaging grenade, you can also use your grenade to empower the strength of your abilities. With Roaring Flames, you are able to pick up your hammer whenever you throw it, just don't let it expire. So it will go away if you don't pick it up after a certain amount of time, but you get an ample amount of time to pick up your hammer. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to where you throw the hammer if you throw it far. We're going to go over the fragments now. There's really three fragments I recommend. The first is Ember of Empyrean. Solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant effects applied to you. Ember of Solace, radiant and restoration effects applied to you have increased duration. Ember of Torches, powered melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant. So, what you're going to want to do with the fourth fragment, it's completely up to you. Ember of Ashes applies more scorch attacks to targets. This actually helps with the damages for Soul Invictus whenever enemies that go into your sunspots. If you have sunspots spawned on the field, they will this will apply more scorch attacks to those targets. You can also give more scorch attacks whenever you're using the throwing hammer because of roaring flames. Ember of Ashes is also very good to have on if you're using the Hothead Exotic Rocket Launcher for the season. This is one of the better DPS rocket launcher options right now. So if you plan on using Dragon's Breath, you really get the most out of Dragon's Breath if you run Embers of Ashes. I think there are a couple of other options you could run as well, including Ember of Searing. Defeating a scorched target grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. If you're using weapons that have incandescent, you're giving scorch stacks to targets, and let's say you throw out your hammer but you're not able to pick it back up, Ember of Searing helps you get your hammer back as well, and you're also creating fire sprite. Whenever you pick up fire sprites, they give you grenade energy. You're also going to be able to scorch targets because of your sunspots, so again, even your sunspots can help you grant yourself additional melee regen. I would consider would be Ember of Tempering. Solar weapon final blows grant you and your allies increased recovery for a short duration, stacks to 3 times. So let's say maybe not everyone on your team is running full recov. I think this is going to be a solid option to consider. While Ember of Tempering is active, your weapons have increased airborne effectiveness, and your solar weapon final blows create a fire sprite. So this is going to be an additional way to make fire sprites to help you with your grenade regen, and this is probably going to be one of the more consistent ways to spawn fire sprites to help you with that grenade regen, so that way you can have a high uptime on your healing grenade to start the whole process over of Ember of Empyrean. Ember of Ashes, if you plan on using Hothead, go with Ember of Ashes. If you're concerned about not having a high uptime on your melee ability, I would consider Ember of Searing. And if you really want to lean into the Solar Weapon Final Blow fantasy, I would recommend Ember of Tempering. Play for this is going to be throwing down your healing grenade, using it first. Then you can just run around and hammer throw on targets with the roaring flames if you want to do that. You also can just throw down the healing grenade and then start getting solar weapon final blows, which will activate Ember of Empyrean. So what you're trying to do here is chain the restoration that you're going to be using. You can also hit an enemy first with your melee throwing hammer to activate Radiant. And you can also throw your healing grenade down, so that way you can chain your Radiance and your Restoration. So Radiant is a damage buff to your weapons, and then Restoration is going to be the act of you starting to replenish your health. So this is going to be the Solar Ember of Empyrean chain, and this is going to be what really carries the build. Ember of Solace extends the effects of Radiant Restoration, like I said earlier, and Ember of Torches is there to just give you an easy access to the Radiant buff. So moving right along, we'll take a look at the stat distribution. Mobility, you want to run as low as possible. This does not help your character too much for Titan specifically. Resilience, you want to run tier 10 for that 30% damage reduction. Recovery, you want to have moderately to relatively high. I honestly probably have it a little bit too high for this build, but are you really going to complain about high recovery? Probably not. There's a lot of ways to get health back in this build. 90 recovery, You can make an argument it's that it is excessive, but you go with what you want. Discipline, I have it moderate to moderately low here. If you want to have a high grenade cooldown, I don't think you can have a problem with running that high. Intellect stat, I'm running it moderate here. I think you don't necessarily have to go too high on intellect because of the armor mods, and I will show you how I supplement that here. And then strength. The strength is going to be the cooldown for your charged melee ability. You can have a pretty high uptime on your hammer as long as you're actively tracking and running toward it. So the strength stat technically not that important, and it can become less important depending on if you choose to run Ember of Searing, because the scorch stacks grant melee energy if you do lose your hammer. So you are able to just pick up your hammer before it expires, and it should come back within 3 seconds. So you're gonna be good on your stat distrib. You don't have to really prioritize too much. I would say resilience first, recov or discipline second, and then the other one third, whichever one you choose. Let's go into the armor mod selection. So the main important one to run here is going to be hands-on, gain bonus super energy on melee kills. This is going to be the staple armor mod for the helmet. Um, After that, you can run your choice of siphon for whatever weapon you plan on using, primary wise, or whatever you want to choose for add and clear. I'm using solar for this build, so I just go with harmonic siphon. Arm mods here, the most important one is going to be heavy handed. Your power melee final blows create orbs of power. Also, like impact induction, causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. When I was running fusion grenades, I really liked fastball. You increase the grenade throw distance. You don't have to run fastball. It's up to you if you do want to use fusion grenades. You have room for fastball, consider it. Right now, I'm just using healing, so it doesn't matter how far you throw it. We're going to go on to the chest piece now. I leave all three of the resistance mod slots. I leave them all available. If you want to have a reserve for your heavy weapon ammo, you are more than free to do so, and then have two available for resistance mods. That's completely up to you. If you're going into a boss phase, I would consider at least having one harmonic reserves, if not three, or whatever reserve type of your choice that you can do. Let's move on to the leg piece. I'm using Orbs of Restoration. Picking up an orb grants a small amount of energy to your ability with the least energy. Depending on how your abilities are going, this is generally going to end up, or how your ability uptime is going. This is most likely going to end up going to either your class item or the grenade, because you should be able to have a high uptime on your hammer because of the nature of the hammer mechanic. For the other two leg mods, I'm using Recuperation, replenishes health each time you pick up an Orb of Power. This is another avenue of getting your health back. And then we're using Innervation, reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an Orb of Power. So in this build, you're going to have multiple avenues of giving yourself health back and giving yourself grenade energy back through your orbs and through picking up fire sprites as well, your grenade regen. And then you're giving yourself health regen, obviously, through restoration. And then on the class item, I am running a Reaper mod to make sure I can spawn a orb on my next weapon, Final Blow. And then I'm running 2 copies of Bomber just to have that little bit more of a cheat back onto my grenade cooldown. Honestly, you have a variety of options you can use. I I think at least one bomber is probably necessary. I think you can swap out what you would like to do here. Maybe if you really like, maybe if you're using a double special setup, consider special finisher. It just depends on you and what you want to do. So that's going to be it for the build breakdown. I would, for weapons, either I would recommend whatever weapon you choose for your ad clear. I do recommend incandescent rolled weapons, ones that are popular and one of the easiest ones to get crafted. I would recommend the Ambit AR2 as it has incandescent, and whenever you get kills with it, you can apply scorch stacks to targets. I think that's going to be a good way to go. BXR also has incandescent if you're into using that frame pulse rifle and PE. I I personally really like the BXR Battler. It's one of my favorite weapons ever. Um, if you have a heavy LMG that is a solar and can get incandescent, I highly recommend using it. So yeah. With that being said, if you have any questions or concerns, let me know down in the comments. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a good one.